You don't belong in this family, my dad snapped, his face red with rage. Then, without hesitation, he ripped the crisp white envelope in half, the job offer I'd worked my whole life for. My fingers trembled, my throat burned. But I didn't cry, because if I did, they'd win. Beside him, my sister Delaney leaned against the oak kitchen table with a lazy smirk, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She only got the offer because they felt sorry for her, she muttered. Let's be honest. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I could still hear the HR manager's voice on the call that morning. We've never seen someone ace every single round with this much poise. Welcome aboard, Kendall. My name is Kendall James, and this job wasn't charity, it was mine. But standing there, watching my father rip it in half in front of everyone, my mom silently washing dishes like she'd heard nothing, my brother Jason checking his phone, and Delaney glowing like a victor, I realized something. They never wanted me to succeed. They never thought I could. Dad tossed the torn offer onto the kitchen floor like garbage. You think you're better than your sister? She knows her place. You? You're always chasing dreams like some lost child. We didn't raise you for this corporate crap. My lips parted, but no words came. For years, I'd tried to earn his respect, pushed myself through college without help, took side jobs, skipped meals, graduated top of my class. But in this house, none of it mattered. You're just a temp waitress with a degree no one asked for, Delaney added with a cruel grin. She had a point. For the past 4 months, I'd been doing waitressing gigs while applying for real opportunities. No one in this house believed I'd make it. Until this offer came. A 6-figure corporate role at one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the state. And now, it lay in ruins at my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just turned away. But what they didn't know was that my husband, Logan, had seen it all, quietly watching from the front door, still dressed in his black suit from the meeting he'd just stepped out of. He had one hand in his pocket, the other resting on the shoulder of an older man in a navy coat, the same man who signed the letter they just tore apart, the owner of the company. Dad saw them last. His mouth froze mid-sentence, Delaney's eyes widened, and the silence that filled that room, it was electric. The tension in the room could slice skin. My father's eyes flicked from Logan to the older man beside him, and suddenly the air shifted, like a wolf pack, sensing danger. Delaney's smirk dropped as the man in the navy coat stepped forward with a commanding presence. His sharp eyes scanned the room before resting on the torn paper at my feet. Is this how you treat your daughter's achievements? He asked calmly, his voice smooth but laced with quiet authority. No one spoke, not even my mother, who finally turned from the sink, wiping her wet hands nervously on her apron. I didn't know who you were, Dad finally stuttered. Sir, this isn't what it looks like. Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, the man replied. My heart thudded. I'd never seen my father at a loss for words. He was a man who always had something to say, especially when it came to belittling me. Logan placed his hand gently on my lower back. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I felt the weight of his touch, steady, reassuring. He leaned in and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. I told you, you wouldn't have to fight them alone anymore. The man in the coat walked toward me and extended his hand. Kendall, I'm Greg Whitman, founder and chair of Whitman Consulting. Your work stood out far above the others. That letter you were sent, ripped or not, was just the beginning. We were actually hoping to offer you a more senior role, effective immediately. My mouth opened. Wait, what? Greg smiled warmly. Logan showed me your freelance business plans, your data reports. The way you think, it's rare. The job was already yours. But after speaking with Logan this afternoon, we realized we were aiming too low. I want you leading one of our new development units in New York, if you're willing. My hands shook. Yes, I'm willing. Delaney took a step forward, her voice suddenly sweet. Wow, Kendall, that's amazing. I didn't know you were working with Mr. Whitman. Maybe you could help me get in too? I mean, you know I've always looked up to you. I turned slowly. Looked up to me? I said softly. You just said I only got the job out of pity. Delaney's lips twitched, caught in her own lies. Greg's gaze sharpened. I don't think we'll be needing any more James family recommendations. Thank you. Dad swallowed hard. His face was pale now, his voice quieter. Kendall, we were just trying to push you to be stronger. That's all. I didn't mean to. I didn't realize. You never did, I said. And I stopped waiting for you to try. I bent down, picked up the shredded offer letter, and calmly handed it to Logan. He smiled, folded the pieces neatly, and placed them in his coat pocket. Souvenir, he said, for the day she left your limits behind. Nobody spoke as we walked toward the door. And as we stepped outside, the evening air sharp with autumn chill, I finally exhaled. But inside my chest, something deeper was stirring. Not just relief, resolve. Because this wasn't just about a job offer. This was about reclaiming my voice, and I was only just getting started. I didn't go back to that house for weeks, not even a call. But it didn't take long for the messages to start. At first, it was text from my mom. Come by sometime, your dad didn't mean it. Then voicemails from Delaney. Can we talk? I think we got off on the wrong foot. Even Jason, my brother who never once defended me, left a cryptic. You should know what they're planning. I ignored them. Until one day, Logan handed me his phone. Kendall, he said carefully, you need to hear this. It was a recorded call. Jason had secretly sent it. My father's voice crackled through the speaker, bitter and venomous. She embarrassed me in front of everyone, my own daughter, acting like she's better than us. And with her husband too, smug little punk, pulling strings with that Whitman guy. I don't care what offer she got, I'm cutting her off. No inheritance, no contact. Then Delaney's voice. Dad, calm down. We can still fix this. Let me apply to Whitman too. Maybe if I say Kendall referred me. You think she'll help you after you treated her like that? She's got her own agenda now. Then maybe we flip the story. Say she lied about the job, about Logan. Spread a little doubt. People always believe the loudest voice first. Silence, and then laughter. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just resentment. They wanted to ruin me. I stood up from the couch in disbelief. They were going to lie about me? Logan's jaw tightened. They still might, but they won't get far. I've already contacted HR. We're locking your name in files from internal referrals. They won't be able to fake anything. My stomach turned. All my life, I'd assumed if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, they'd come around. But now I saw the truth. This wasn't just a toxic family, it was a battlefield. And they'd drawn first blood. The next week, Greg Whitman invited Logan and me to a dinner party with senior execs. It was formal, high-end, and packed with some of the most respected people in the business world. I wore a sleek navy dress, Logan in a tailored black suit. The moment we walked in, people turned. Because I wasn't just someone's daughter anymore, I was someone they needed to meet. The night was surreal. Conversations about international expansion, innovation boards, upcoming IPOs, and in the middle of it all, me. At one point, Greg pulled me aside. I want you to know, he said gently, people like your family, they don't get to define you. You've earned everything that's coming, and we're just getting started. I nodded, barely holding back the sting in my eyes. But later that night, as Logan and I returned home, there was a car parked across the street. Jason, I stepped out before Logan could stop me. He rolled down the window and motioned me over. I had to warn you, he said. Dad's trying to file something against Logan. Some kind of bogus complaint about manipulation or insider influence. Says Logan pressured Greg to hire you. I clenched my jaw. Is he serious? Jason looked tired. For the first time, maybe even regretful. He's angry. He thinks you humiliated him. He's making it personal. I stood in silence for a second, then said, he made it personal the second he tore that letter. Jason leaned back. I never said it before, but you didn't deserve any of it. I gave a small, dry smile. You all let it happen. Then I turned and walked away. Because I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to win. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived at our door. Thick, official. Sealed with the Whitman Company crest. Inside, it wasn't paperwork or promotion notices, it was evidence. A printed transcript, attached emails. Proof that my father had contacted not just HR, but 2 board members. He'd fabricated a story that Logan had bribed Greg Whitman, that I'd lied on my resume, that my marriage was a sham for career gain. It was so outrageous, so painfully desperate. It should have made me laugh, but it didn't. It made me furious. Logan watched me as I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling, my chest heaving. They really did it, I whispered. They really tried to destroy me. Greg had already seen it. He included a personal note. Thought you should be aware of what was said behind your back. None of it holds any weight with us, but you deserve to know. Let me know how you want to proceed. Logan sat down across from me. We could pursue legal action, defamation, false claims to a corporation. It's real, it's serious. But I shook my head. No, that's what they want. They want to turn this into a war, drag us down to their level. He waited, watching me carefully. Then what do you want? I looked down at the last page, one that listed a string of donations made in my father's name to Whitman's charitable division. They were small but recurring, from years ago, likely to win favor or curry attention. I smiled. It was cold, calculated. I want to do it the way they never expected, I said. Not with a lawsuit, not with drama. Logan raised a brow. With what then? I looked up at him. Power. At the next Whitman board meeting, Greg made a special announcement. A new team was being formed, the Innovation and Ethics Committee, and I was made the founding chair. It meant oversight, internal audits, transparency, and it meant I had access to every document and every backdoor channel my father once thought he could abuse. The irony was delicious. Meanwhile, word got out that someone from my family had attempted to sabotage my career, and the business community responded exactly how you'd expect. They closed their doors to him. Sponsorships dried up, invitations stopped coming. Suddenly, the James name wasn't respected anymore. It was a warning sign. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a scene, but they felt it every single day. Until one evening, I got a call from my mom. She sounded frail, shaken. Your father isn't doing well, she said quietly. He's not sleeping. He lost the bid on the town project. Delaney hasn't found a new job. We've been struggling. I stayed quiet. Then she added, he asked if you'd be willing to talk, just once. I sat there for a long time, staring at the skyline outside my window. This was the man who told me I didn't belong in his family, and now he was asking for a conversation. I took a breath. Tell him I'll meet him. Logan looked at me across the room. Are you sure? No, I admitted, but I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for me. Because forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing yourself from the weight they tried to put on you. I agreed to meet my father at the old diner off Main Street, the same one where he used to take us for pancakes when we were kids. The place hadn't changed much. Same cracked leather booths, same flickering neon sign. But I had changed. I walked in wearing a slate gray power suit, hair tied neatly back, heels echoing on the linoleum floor. My presence wasn't loud, but it commanded silence. He was already seated in the corner, looking smaller than I remembered. A man once too proud to bend now hunched over a chipped mug of black coffee, his eyes fixed on the table as if it held all the answers he'd lost. He looked up when I approached, and for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar in my father's eyes. Shame. Kendall, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thanks for coming. I sat down slowly, crossing my legs, meeting his gaze without blinking. I'm not here to make peace, Dad. I'm here to listen. You wanted to talk, so talk. He flinched. The weight of his pride, so long worn like armor, seemed to crumble around him. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I know I messed up, he said. I messed up bad. With you. With everything. He paused, swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd become what you've become. You were always stubborn. I thought I had to beat the softness out of you. I leaned in, voice low and firm. What you called softness was ambition, discipline, self-respect. You tried to crush it because it didn't look like you. He didn't argue, didn't deny it, didn't shift blame. Just sat there with the silence ringing louder than his apology. He reached into his coat and pulled out something, a folded sheet of paper. I recognized it immediately, my offer letter, the original. Not the one he tore. He must have kept a copy. I tried to tape it back together, he muttered. I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted something to remind me how wrong I was. I stared at it, not with anger, not with pity, but with clarity. You didn't believe in me, I said. Not when I applied for colleges, not when I worked late shifts and studied all night, not when I showed you that business plan. You saw Delaney's comfort as strength and my drive as rebellion. He winced. I was afraid. Afraid that if you left us behind, you'd never look back. And maybe I wouldn't have, I said coldly, if it weren't for Logan and Greg and people who actually saw me for who I was instead of who they wanted me to be. He went quiet again. Kendall, he said after a long pause, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I'm proud. And if you ever need anything, I stood up. That's the difference between us, I said. You only offer support when it benefits you. I don't need anything from you, not anymore. He looked up, eyes damp, but still proud enough not to let a tear fall. Before I turned to leave, I reached into my own purse and placed something on the table. A photo. It was from my first day at Whitman HQ, me in front of the company sign. Smiling, powerful, unapologetically, me. Frame it, I said. Maybe someday, when people ask what happened to your daughter, you can tell them she became something no one expected. Then I walked out. Months passed. I spearheaded Whitman's expansion program into 3 cities. I was featured on a Forbes list for emerging leadership. Delaney, still job hopping. Jason, quietly trying to distance himself from Dad. My mother? She texted occasionally, but the weight of the truth kept her at bay. And my father? He never reached out again, but I heard from a friend that he kept that photo on his desk. Funny, isn't it? The daughter he tore down became the only legacy he had left to display. One evening, Logan and I stood on the balcony of our apartment overlooking the city skyline, the same city I once thought would never open its doors to me. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arm around my waist. I smiled. I think I finally am. Because the truth is, sometimes your real family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one that sees you, believes in you, and stands beside you when your own blood tries to cut you down. I didn't just survive, I rose, and no one would ever tear me down again.
The crystal chandelier shimmered above me, its light bouncing off champagne flutes and sequined gowns as laughter rang through the ballroom like an echo of judgment. I stood near the entrance, clutching the simple bouquet I'd brought as a gift, painfully aware of how out of place I looked in my $40 clearance rack dress. But I was there for my sister, Claire, her engagement night, her moment. Even if I wasn't worthy in my family's eyes. Then it happened. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My mother, Lorraine Carson, designer heels, pearl necklace, perfectly cold, walked straight up to me, her jaw clenched. Why are you even here? She hissed through a smile. I told you to help the caterers in the back. Mom, I whispered, my voice steady. I was invited by Claire. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. She raised her hand. The slap cracked louder than the jazz band playing near the open bar. My face stung. My heart didn't flinch. You'll never be more than a maid, she screamed, loud enough for everyone to hear. I stared at her, blinking slowly. Around us, the guests gasped, laughed, whispered. I saw my Aunt Jo cover her mouth. My uncle smirked. And Claire looked away. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just straightened my shoulders and said softly, You'll regret this. Then the ballroom doors opened, and in walked Asher Blake, sharp suit, darker eyes, and the kind of commanding presence that made everyone pause mid-breath. The air thickened. Murmurs rose. Heads turned. My mother's lips parted, confusion curling into unease. Who is? Asher's voice cut through the room like a dagger dipped in velvet. Where's my fiancé? Every person turned to me. She owns this place, he said, loud and clear. Now, should we begin the real party? Gasps. Silence. Then chaos. I didn't flinch, because finally they saw me, and they had no idea how deep the story went. The silence in the room wasn't quiet. It was shattered, like the sound after a glass hits marble. My mother stood frozen, her hand still slightly raised from the slap. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled, and for once in my life, she looked small. Asher's presence filled the space like a storm. The man didn't just walk, he owned every step. Broad-shouldered in a tailored navy suit, his watch alone could have paid for the chandeliers above us. But it wasn't the money that made people tremble. It was the power in his voice, and the way his eyes locked on mine like I was the only person that mattered in the room. He reached out and took my hand, as if we'd always belonged like that, in front of everyone who once looked through me like I was invisible. "My fiancée," he said again, louder now. "This woman is the future Mrs. Blake. And from this moment on, anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." My Uncle Ross dropped his glass. "Claire's fiancé, Ethan, the same one who once told me I should date someone my level," visibly paled. My father stepped forward, trying to puff his chest out like the corporate big shot he once was before the last of his stocks fell flat. "You're engaged to her?" he scoffed. "You must be joking." Asher didn't blink. "Does this look like a man who jokes, Mr. Carson?" I'd never seen my father's face change that fast. His jaw clenched. I think in that moment he realized something. Something terrifying. He had no power anymore. Because I wasn't the maid. I was the woman who'd been quietly investing for the last 4 years, stacking paychecks, coding freelance at night, launching a startup from the back room of a bakery while this entire family laughed at me. And now, that startup had been acquired by Asher's firm for $14 million. I wasn't there as a guest. I was co-hosting this engagement party. Because I owned the venue. I turned slowly to my mother, her face pale beneath her flawless makeup. "I asked you for support. For love. For the tiniest shred of kindness." She said nothing. "But you raised me like a servant," I continued. "So now, enjoy being a guest in a house your daughter owns." Then I looked at Claire. And I saw something I didn't expect. Fear. Asher squeezed my hand. "Let's dance, Miss Carson." "Blake," I corrected softly, smiling for the first time that night. Soon to be Blake. And as he pulled me onto the ballroom floor and the guests reluctantly made space, I knew something for certain. This wasn't revenge. This was the beginning of an empire. Built in silence. Seen by none. Feared by all. The room pulsed with a quiet, nervous energy. Somewhere, the jazz band fumbled to find their rhythm again, but the crowd no longer cared about music. They weren't watching the performance. They were watching the shift. The invisible axis on which this entire evening had spun had just snapped, and now the balance of power tilted toward me. Asher's hand rested at the small of my back as we danced slowly, his presence grounding me, anchoring me through the aftershocks of humiliation and revelation. Around us, every pair of eyes followed, some wide with disbelief, others narrowed with envy. My mother hadn't moved. Claire had stepped off to the side, whispering harshly to Ethan, who looked as though he'd seen a ghost. I caught phrases. "She lied to all of us. She's nothing. She's just playing him. How is this even possible?" I leaned into Asher's shoulder just enough to whisper, "They're panicking." He chuckled softly. "Good. They should be." A voice rang out suddenly, sharp, breaking through the murmurs. "You can't be serious about marrying her," Claire barked, her cheeks flushed and her perfectly styled curls trembling from the shake of her rage. "She's been scrubbing toilets since high school." A few people gasped at the cruelty in her tone. A few nodded along. The rest waited, hungry for another blow, hungry to see me fall again. But Asher turned slowly, keeping me by his side. "You must be Claire," he said. "The sister who spent half a decade spending her fiancé's money and your father's reputation. That's right, isn't it? Ethan funded your cosmetic business, and your dad covered the debt when it failed." Claire's lips parted. She hadn't expected that. "I looked into the family before I proposed," he continued, calm but cutting. "I wanted to understand where she came from. I didn't find support. I found opportunists. Parasites." "Don't talk about my family like that." Claire snapped. "I'm not talking about family. I'm talking about people who sold her dignity for social appearances." I stepped forward, releasing Asher's hand, my heart thudding, but not from fear. From clarity. The fog of years of manipulation and quiet belittling had cleared. "Claire," I said softly, "do you remember when I was 14 and you told your friends at school I was the housemaid's daughter?" She looked stunned. That was years ago. It was just a joke. You locked me in the laundry room so I wouldn't embarrass you at your sweet 16. Was that a joke too? Claire didn't answer. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with venom. So, what? You're rich now? You think that makes you something? No, I said, turning toward her fully. What makes me something is that I survived you. I worked while you mocked me. I studied while you called me worthless. I built something from the ground up while you laughed at me for carrying trays and wiping counters. I made you strong, she hissed. You should be thanking me. No, I whispered. You didn't make me strong. You tried to break me. That's not the same thing. The air grew heavy. You could feel the weight of it pressing on every chest in the room. Then Asher stepped in again, pulling out an envelope from his jacket. And for those of you still wondering if this is a joke, he said, here's a copy of the acquisition deal signed by our board last Friday. Her company is now part of Blake Enterprises. And per our partnership agreement, she now sits on the board. She owns majority shares in 3 of our subsidiaries. He handed the envelope to my father. My father didn't even open it. He just sank into a chair, like the wind had been knocked out of him. That man, once towering with arrogance and ambition, was now nothing more than a wilted shadow of his former self. Because he knew every cruel word, every cold shoulder, every time he called me less than, it had all come home to roost. I just don't understand, my mother muttered. You were never supposed to win. I looked at her for a long moment, and then said, that's because you never thought I was playing the same game. Asher extended his hand again. I took it. We walked back through the crowd as it parted like the Red Sea, people unsure whether to clap or cower. And as we approached the balcony doors, I paused, turned to them one last time. This isn't revenge, I said. This is just me standing. And with that, I walked out into the night air. But the story wasn't over yet. Because what came next would change everything they thought they knew about me and themselves. The cool night air kissed my skin as Asher and I stepped onto the terrace. The ballroom lights flickered behind us like the last gasps of a fire trying to stay alive, but inside, that fire was dying. I had taken back my voice, my place, and the illusion they'd clung to for years, that I would always be beneath them, had crumbled in seconds. But what they didn't know was that I had more to say. Asher turned to me, his brow furrowed. You okay? I will be, I said softly. But there's something I need to do first. I stepped back inside. The crowd was still murmuring, stunned, no music playing now. It was as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting. I walked slowly toward the raised platform where the band had once performed. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Excuse me, I said, my voice loud, clear, firm. If I could have just a moment. The crowd stilled. I took the mic from the stunned pianist and stood in front of them. Not as the girl who once waited tables, not as the invisible sister, not as the maid, but as me. Fully. You all know me as Claire's sister. I began, eyes scanning faces. But most of you never actually saw me. Not really. And that was fine. I didn't need your approval. But tonight I realized something. Silence allows rot to grow. So let me speak. There were whispers. People shifted. But no one interrupted. My mother told me I would never be more than a maid. My sister locked me in closets so I wouldn't ruin her image. My father said I wasn't polished enough to sit with the guests. And all of you stood by and laughed. Maybe you didn't throw the stones, but you watched me bleed. Claire snapped, Oh, please, this is just you seeking attention. I turned to her, calm. You think attention is what I want? No. I want truth. I took a breath. Claire, do you want to tell everyone what happened to Nana's trust fund? Her face turned white. I continued, or should I explain how you forged her signature to cover your business loan when your boutique failed? How you begged me to stay quiet and promised you'd make it up to me? And how Mom and Dad covered it up when I threatened to go to the police. Gasps erupted. Claire stammered, That's a lie. I pulled out the flash drive from my clutch. Audio file. Your voice. You crying, saying you didn't mean to lie. I've kept it for 3 years. Her knees buckled. I stayed quiet to protect you, I said. Even after everything. But you all never changed. You just hid your venom behind crystal glasses and designer gowns. So here's the truth. I didn't come tonight to ruin this engagement. I turned to Ethan. I came to free it. His eyes darted toward Claire. Is this true? Claire didn't answer. So Ethan walked off the stage, without her. She collapsed into a chair, her hand over her mouth, mascara streaking down. My mother rushed forward, trying to grab the mic. You're destroying this family. No, I said calmly. I'm rebuilding it with honesty and without you. I dropped the mic, not out of drama, but out of finality. I was done explaining myself. Done shrinking. Asher was waiting by the exit. I walked toward him, but not before one last glance at my father, who now looked at me not with hate or anger, but with regret. I didn't need an apology. I already had peace. And as Asher and I stepped into the waiting black car outside, I realized something. They spent their whole lives trying to erase me, but they never realized I was the author of the next chapter, and it was just getting started. The next morning, the headlines did what I never needed my family to do. They told the truth. Engagement party turns into bombshell scandal. Heiress exposed. Sister emerges as billionaire powerhouse. Carson family in crisis. Former maid now holds all the cards. Who is Eleanor Carson? Meet the woman who shook the social elite overnight. The world now knew what my family had spent years trying to suppress. I sat on the terrace of Asher's Manhattan penthouse, the skyline glittering around us like a kingdom made of light. My phone buzzed with 100 messages, reporters, investors, socialites suddenly remembering my name. But I wasn't interested in noise. Asher walked out holding 2 mugs. Hazelnut oat milk latte for the CEO who broke the internet, he said with a soft grin. I took it with a grateful smile. You saw the articles? He sat beside me. Saw them? You broke them. Every outlet's calling you the new face of female entrepreneurship. And let's not pretend they aren't obsessed with the fact that you quietly helped fund 3 women's shelters last year, while they all called you a nobody. I stared out at the horizon. It still doesn't feel real. Asher leaned closer. You didn't just survive, Ellie. You rewrote the rules. You gave every girl who's ever been told she wasn't enough a reason to stand up. That's when my phone rang. The caller ID said Claire. I hesitated. Answer it, Asher said gently. Closure matters. I did. Eleanor. Claire's voice cracked. I don't even know where to begin. I let her sit in silence for a few seconds before replying. Try the truth. I messed up. I was jealous. I was cruel. I thought if I made you smaller, I'd feel bigger. But all I did was lose the one person who ever actually loved me without condition. She was crying now. I don't want your forgiveness, she said. I just needed to say I'm sorry. A pause. My heartbeat slowed. I believe you, I replied quietly. And I hope someday you believe in yourself enough not to need to destroy others to feel worthy. She wept. I didn't. I'd already cried enough tears for the both of us. Later that afternoon, I returned to the ballroom, my ballroom, for a press conference. Clean, professional, but not cold. Asher stood behind me in silent support, but I was the one who faced the lights. Good morning, I began. Many of you know me as the woman whose family tried to keep her in the shadows. But today, I stand in the light, not because I needed to be seen, but because I earned this place. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to inspire the ones who think they'll never rise. You will. Quietly. Powerfully. Relentlessly. And when you do, I looked straight into the cameras. They won't see it coming. And they won't be able to stop it. That night, I walked back into that empty ballroom. The same one where I'd been slapped. Shamed. Dismissed. I stood exactly where it had happened. And I whispered to the silence. I forgive you. All of you. But I'll never be you. Asher joined me. You sure you're ready for what's next? I turned to him, a fire behind my eyes that wasn't there before. I was born ready. They just never bothered to look close enough to see it. And as we walked out of that once cold palace of shame, the city opened itself up to me. Not as a maid, not as the quiet sister, not as someone to mock, but as a woman who had the last word. And it echoed for generations. I'll never forget the sound of my necklace snapping. It wasn't just the chain breaking, it was years of silent resentment, jealousy, and manipulation boiling over in one violent moment. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My mother's fingers gripped the locket at my neck so tightly that I thought she might rip my skin too. And then, snap. It flew from my chest like it had been yanked out of my soul. Landed right in the dip tray next to my aunt's half-eaten sandwich. "You selfish disgrace," she screamed, right there in front of the entire family. Everyone went quiet. My cousin stopped giggling. My uncle paused mid-sip. Even the baby in the corner stopped fussing, like even he knew something dangerous had just cracked open in the room. I stood frozen, my chest burning where the necklace used to lie. My voice wouldn't come out. She pointed a trembling, furious finger at me. "How dare you refuse to sign that house over? It wasn't even meant for you. You think you're better than all of us now because your dead grandfather handed you the keys to his little fairy tale cottage? You're pathetic." I should have seen this coming. Ever since the will was read, the air in the family had turned venomous. Grandpa left the lake house to me. Not to my mother. Not to my uncles. Just me. They expected I'd be a good girl and sign it over. I didn't. And that's when they turned. "I raised you," she kept shouting. "I sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay me." That house should have gone to the family, not some ungrateful little girl playing grown-up. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just looked at her, and, for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. Not fear. Not sadness. Nothing. Because while she was losing control, while they were all showing me who they really were, I already knew something they didn't. Something I had done last week. Quietly. Carefully. Something that would change everything by morning. They thought the house was all Grandpa left me. They had no idea what else I had taken from them. And, trust me, they weren't ready for it. After she tore off the necklace, she smirked like she'd won something, like she'd broken me. But she hadn't. If anything, I saw her more clearly than ever. I bent down slowly, picked up the locket from beside the stained napkin, and held it in my palm. The chain was broken, but the locket was still intact. My fingers closed around it like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. That locket held a picture of me and Grandpa on the dock at Lake Willoughby. I was 7. My hair was in wild curls. His hand rested gently on my shoulder, like he was guarding me from the world. I stood up and looked around the room. Everyone was staring at me, my cousins, who never took me seriously. My Aunt Lorraine, who always called me the emotional one. My father, silent as always, pretending not to pick sides, but his eyes avoiding mine like they held shame. "I'm not signing it over," I said calmly. My voice was quiet, but it carried like a blade through butter. "I don't owe any of you a thing." That's when my cousin Jeremy laughed. "Come on, Sam. Don't act like you earned it. You were the soft one Grandpa felt sorry for. It should have gone to the family." I blinked. "I am family." "Barely," my mother muttered. "Always out on your own, playing the victim." My chest tightened, but I stayed still. I knew if I reacted, they'd win. That's all they wanted. A show. A scene they could twist later into "see how unstable she is." So I stayed cold. I smiled. "You'll all see tomorrow," I said. "Enjoy your dinner tonight." And then I walked out of the house, past the lawn chairs and tiki torches, across the gravel driveway, past the car Dad never let me borrow as a teen because I wasn't responsible enough. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I drove home with the windows down, the locket still clenched in my hand. And by the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already buzzing with texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Because what I had done wasn't just about keeping Grandpa's lake house. It was about what else he had left behind. Not in the will. Not in some envelope. but in a file, in a transfer, in a secret he shared only with me 3 weeks before he died.
The trust.
The silent ownership. The company. And by morning, every single person at that dinner was going to realize they didn't just lose a house. They lost everything. I couldn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because the silence in my apartment was finally peaceful. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Not free in a dramatic, throw it all away kind of way. I mean the kind of freedom where you stop waiting for approval. Where you stop trying to be enough for people who are committed to misunderstanding you. I curled up on the couch, barefoot, legs pulled to my chest, and opened Grandpa's old leather journal. He'd given it to me one afternoon, sitting at the lake house just 3 weeks before the stroke that ended everything. He was wearing that red flannel shirt I loved, sipping black coffee on the porch, while I was trying to fix the broken screen door for the 100th time. "I trust you more than I trust anyone," he said. I'd laughed. "Grandpa, I can barely keep my succulents alive." But he wasn't joking. He handed me that journal, a little battered but well-loved, and said, "Everything's in here. Read it when I'm gone. But only after the will is read." I didn't understand it then. But now, sitting alone in my dimly lit apartment, flipping through its pages, it all made sense. On page 47, there was a name, a company, an ownership document. And at the bottom, his signature. Dated, stamped, witnessed. Blake and Ashcroft Holdings. 70% ownership. Transferred to Samantha Blake. Not to my mother. Not to Uncle Dean or Aunt Lorraine.
Me.
Because years ago, while they were busy mocking him for being old school and ignoring him at holiday dinners, I was the only one who visited, who listened, who helped him sort out the boxes in the attic, labeled with fading ink and war-era stamps.
He saw me, and he rewarded me.
But I knew this couldn't just be about revenge. I wasn't going to rub it in their faces like they expected. I wasn't like them. That wasn't who Grandpa raised me to be. Still, the truth needed to come out. So the next morning, I dressed carefully. A clean, simple navy dress. No dramatic makeup. No jewelry. Just the locket, now attached to a new chain. I walked into the Blake and Ashcroft downtown office like I'd walked in 100 times as a kid tagging along with Grandpa, except this time, I wasn't a visitor. When I walked past reception, the same woman who once asked me to wait outside blinked at me. "Ma'am, do you have an appointment?" I turned slightly. "Tell Mr. Harrison Blake, that's my uncle, that the majority shareholder has arrived." Her face paled. I'm sorry?" I handed her the document. Not a copy. Not a scan. The original. She read it once, then again. She stood up so fast her chair rolled into the wall. "Please, just wait right here." I nodded and took a seat. Crossed my legs. Waited. Upstairs, chaos must have erupted because 10 minutes later, I heard loud voices, rushed footsteps, and then the elevator opened. My uncle, my mother, and their lawyer came down like storm clouds. My mother looked furious. My uncle looked pale. And me? I smiled. "You thought you took everything from me last night," I said softly. "But Grandpa left something behind you couldn't steal." Their lawyer tried to speak, but I cut him off. "The trust is airtight. The signatures are real. And I already had it notarized and registered with the board this morning. Effective immediately, I control 70% of this company." The house was just the beginning. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her eyes darted around like she was searching for a way out. And my uncle, Mr. Big Man in a gray suit, just stood there, shoulders deflating. Because they finally understood. Everything they built, everything they thought they controlled, now belonged to the girl they humiliated. And I wasn't just keeping the house. I was taking the family legacy with me. They stood there in stunned silence, like statues chipped and cracking under the weight of a truth they never imagined would catch up to them. My mother's lips quivered first. "This isn't right," she whispered, shaking her head, like saying it enough times would erase the ink on the documents. "Your grandfather would never." "He did," I said.
Calm.
Steady. Unshaken. He knew exactly what he was doing. And deep down, you know it too. She turned to the lawyer, her voice rising like a drowning woman grabbing at air. There's gotta be a loophole, something to contest. That document. It has to be fake. But the lawyer, a man who'd spent most of my childhood brushing me off at family barbecues, just sighed and gave her the slow, painful truth. It's not fake. It's binding. Fully executed. Fully legal. It holds more weight than the will. The trust was set up separately, privately, and with full capacity. My Uncle Harrison staggered back like someone had hit him in the gut. She doesn't know how to run this company, he snapped, his voice rising in panic. She's a teacher. She fixes screen doors and reads books about coastal history. She's not a businesswoman. I tilted my head. Neither were you when Grandpa brought you in. You failed your first restaurant venture and lost over $500,000. I read the ledgers. Grandpa saved you from ruin. Twice. He blinked. The air sucked out of him like a deflated balloon. My mother was trembling now. You're doing this out of spite. No, I said quietly. I'm doing this because for once, I'm not letting anyone guilt me out of what I've earned. Grandpa trusted me. You think I was just his charity case, but I was the only one who showed up when it mattered. While you were busy counting what you thought you'd inherit, I was there, making coffee, listening to him talk about his regrets, his vision, his fears. And then I looked my mother right in the eyes. You ripped the locket off my neck last night like you were ripping away my worth, I said, voice low and even. But you didn't break me. You just made it clear I was never part of this family unless I did what you wanted. And I'm done doing that. The lawyer cleared his throat. As of this morning, the controlling stake has been transferred. Samantha will need access to all files, accounts, and board contacts. The transition begins today. I stood tall, heart pounding, but my hands were steady. You're not being removed, I said. Not yet. But you will report to me. And from this moment forward, your influence is no longer unchecked. Uncle Harrison's face flushed red. You can't do this. I already did, I interrupted. And I turned away. I walked past the glass walls, the marble floors, the receptionist who now looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And as I stepped into the elevator, alone, I exhaled. Not from relief. No, not yet, but from finally being done with begging to be seen. I was done shrinking. Done explaining. Done letting people treat me like an extra in the story of my own life. Now, I was holding the pen, but there was still one more thing I needed to do. Because the story didn't end with the company. It didn't even end with the house. There was something else, something I hadn't told anyone yet. A letter, locked in Grandpa's journal, with instructions. A final page I hadn't turned. And it would take everything I had left in me to follow it. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't pour a glass of wine. I didn't cry.
I didn't even change out of my dress.
I went straight to the cedar box beneath my bed and pulled out Grandpa's journal. I'd read every word of it over the past 3 weeks, except one final folded page taped to the inside of the back cover. The envelope was sealed with wax, dark red, the old-fashioned way, and on the outside, in Grandpa's shaky handwriting, it simply read, "Only open this when they turn on you." I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time just holding it. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I peeled the wax seal back slowly. Inside was a letter. 1 page.
Neat.
Intentional. And as I read, my hands started to shake. My Sam, if you're reading this, then you already know the truth. They never deserved what they were waiting for. Not the house. Not the company.
Not you.
But there's more. You remember the cabin out by Linwood Creek? The one I always said was just for fishing? That land sits on a gold vein. I bought it in 1982 from a man who didn't realize what he had. Over the years, I kept it off the books.
Quiet.
Even from the family. I wanted to pass it on to someone who understood value beyond money. There's a deposit box key hidden in the floorboard under the bed in that cabin. And in that box, the mineral rights, the claim documents, and $1.2 million I moved offshore before the cancer scare. It's yours. Not to flaunt. not to throw in their faces. To build your life. Start your real dream, whatever that is. Not the one they told you were supposed to have. And if they come crawling, and trust me, they will, don't harden. Just don't bend. You were never meant to live under their rules. Love you always. Grandpa. I reread it 5 times. Each line hit like a thunderclap. I wasn't just the owner of a house or a company. I had the power to walk away from them entirely and thrive. The next day, the calls started. Aunt Lorraine called crying. Said she was ashamed of how everyone treated me. She wanted to have lunch. Uncle Harrison emailed asking for a second chance to talk things through. Even my father, who hadn't said a word when Mom humiliated me, sent a text. You know I've always respected you. Maybe we can rebuild. But the one that broke me wasn't any of them. It was Mom. She showed up at my door, eyes tired, makeup smudged like she hadn't slept. I know I went too far, she whispered. But that house, I thought we'd all be taken care of. I was scared. That's all. Please, Sam. We're family. I looked at her for a long time. For a moment, I saw the mother I remembered from childhood, the one who tucked me in, who braided my hair, who kissed my bruised knees. But that woman was gone. This one had let her hunger for control and entitlement drown the rest of her humanity. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I just said, you don't get to treat people like dirt and then cry when they stand up. Grandpa saw something in me, and I finally see it too. So no, I'm not signing anything over. I'm not giving back what was never yours to begin with. I'm not playing the scapegoat anymore. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. And Mom, you didn't just rip a necklace off my neck. You ripped off the last thread of guilt I had about walking away from you. I closed the door. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. It's been 6 months now. The company is running better than ever. I kept half the staff, restructured the rest, and brought in a real operations manager who doesn't talk down to women. I went to the Linwood Creek cabin alone, lifted the floorboard, and found the key just where Grandpa said it would be. Everything in that safety deposit box was real, verified, legitimate. A fortune I never expected, but one I now know how to protect. And I started something new. A grant fund, named after Grandpa, for women trying to rebuild their lives after family betrayal. Because I know now, revenge is just survival in disguise. And growth. Growth is building something so solid that no one can ever pull it from your neck again. Not even your own mother. If this story hits you even a little, just hit that like button. It helps more than you think. Don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt this kind of pain. You're not alone. You're a disgrace. My mom's voice shattered the air like glass breaking. The guests at our engagement dinner froze. Her hand came next, hot and loud across my cheek. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, staring at the woman who once tucked me into bed, now throwing me to the wolves for refusing to marry the man she handpicked. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I looked at Mark. His arrogant smirk told me he wasn't on this. He wasn't even surprised. My mom kept yelling, accusing me of shaming the family, calling me selfish for rejecting a man who could make all our problems go away. Then she told me to get out, kicked me out of my own home. I walked out barefoot, wearing a dress she picked, into a night that was colder than her heart. No one followed me, not even Dad, not even my brother Shane, who just stood there watching like it was a scene from a movie he didn't care for. I was 23, broke, and officially alone. But I still didn't say a word. I wasn't going to beg. Not this time. I'd begged enough. I walked 3 miles that night with my heels in hand, tears drying on my face. My phone buzzed. I thought maybe, just maybe one of them had grown a heart. But no. It was an Uber cancellation from the ride Mom had promised. That's when I knew I was dead to them.
And
They were dead to me. I slept at a motel that smelled like wet carpet and cigarette ashes. Used my last $60 on the room. I stared at the ceiling all night, not crying anymore but burning. Burning with something else. I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to come back one day. Not for revenge, but for silence. The kind that speaks louder than screams. Flash forward 12 years later. I stepped out of a private jet in crisp black heels that cost more than the house I grew up in. My sunglasses caught the sun just right as I held my daughter's hand, her soft curls bouncing with each step. "Mommy, is that them?" she asked, pointing ahead. There they were, my mother, my father, my brother, standing on the edge of the tarmac, mouths open, eyes wide, pale as ghosts. I smiled. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. Just above it all. But it was the silence that did it. That frozen, shocked silence. The one that said everything. The one they couldn't take back. And it all started with one slap, one suitcase, and one broken heart that didn't stay broken for long. This is only the beginning. They didn't move. Not when I stepped onto the tarmac. Not when the jet engines cooled behind me. Not even when my daughter let go of my hand and ran straight toward them, toward the strangers she didn't even know were her family. "Grandma?" she asked innocently, stopping inches from my mother. My mother didn't respond. Her hand twitched, maybe from guilt, maybe from shock, but she didn't reach out. She looked like she'd seen a ghost in broad daylight. I walked slowly toward them, my heels sharp against the concrete, each step deliberate, controlled. This wasn't for revenge. This was for dignity. 12 years, I said, stopping a few feet away. That's how long it took me to build a life worth walking away from you for. My father swallowed, his Adam's apple bouncing in his throat. My brother shifted uncomfortably, like a boy caught doing something wrong in church, even though guilt had never once touched him before. "She looks like you," Shane finally muttered, looking at my daughter. "She is my last name," I replied. "And none of yours." The tension sliced through the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence they once forced me into, I'd turned it into steel. 12 years earlier, I'd taken a job cleaning hotel rooms and bussing tables in a cafe that served people like the man my mother wanted me to marry. Mark drove by once in his black BMW and tossed a $20 tip at my feet, like I was a dog he'd trained. That was the last time I saw him. I used that 20 to buy a secondhand laptop. I taught myself code, marketing, then finance. Worked 3 jobs at once, slept 3 hours a night, and poured everything into a project I didn't even name until 5 years in Salt Plus Grit, a digital consulting firm for small-town businesses run by women just like me, rejected, underestimated, kicked aside. At year 7, Salt Plus Grit got acquired by a private investor for $6.2 million. I stayed on as CEO. By year 10, I was buying companies like the one Mark's family used to run. By year 12, I wasn't just a woman with a daughter. I was a woman with options. "You were supposed to marry up," my mother finally said. Her voice cracked. "I did," I replied. "I married up from everything you thought was good enough for me." Her eyes welled. I thought I'd feel satisfied, but I didn't. It wasn't about pain anymore. It was about proof. Proof that I could rise without bitterness. That I could create a legacy out of what they left behind. My daughter tugged on my hand. "Can I go back inside the plane?" she asked. I nodded. She skipped back toward the jet like it was just another Tuesday. My mother looked at me like she'd missed 1,000 chances to say the right thing. But I'd given her time.
Years.
And all she did was fill that silence with shame. "Why now?" my father finally asked. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I saw a man smaller than the fear he used to make me feel. "I didn't come back for you," I said softly. "I came back because my daughter deserves to know what she walked away from." Then I turned my back to them, exactly the way they once turned their backs to me. Only this time, I walked away with dignity in my spine, a legacy in my hand, and a little girl on board who would never be taught that love comes with conditions. It was year 3 when I hit the bottom so hard, I almost stayed there. A leaking apartment in Jersey City with roaches in the walls. I was 26, barely surviving off waitress tips, and a remote data entry job that paid pennies. My hair was falling out from stress. My stomach ached constantly from cheap instant noodles and bottled water dinners. Then came the test. 2 pink lines. A baby. I stared at the test for what felt like hours, sitting on a bathroom floor that smelled like bleach and mold. No one to call. No one to lean on. Not my mom, who once told me a woman who can't obey doesn't deserve a roof. Not my dad, who avoided confrontation like it was a fire he might get blamed for. And not Shane, my golden child brother, who could burn the house down and still be called the favorite. But life's funny like that. When everyone walks away, you either collapse or you rise. I rose. Not with magic, with madness. I cleaned tables with my belly growing under a faded apron. Took night classes. Learned code from scratch on a secondhand Chromebook that took 15 minutes, just to boot. Slept on a sofa, not a bed, so I could sublet the bedroom and buy diapers when the time came. And then I met her, Dana, a retired software engineer turned small business owner. She came into the diner once a week, always asked for a booth, always tipped like she knew what hunger really looked like. One night, after I dropped her order, she pulled me aside. "You have eyes that don't belong here," she said. I laughed bitterly. That's probably the nicest insult I've had this week. But she wasn't joking. "Show me your work," she said. "I've seen you coding on breaks." I almost cried. Not because she offered me a job. Because she saw me. Dana gave me a shot, entry level. Remote work from my couch. I took it and turned it into magic. I built prototypes, managed social media campaigns, rewrote brand strategies from the ground up. I didn't just do the job. I devoured it. By the time my daughter was born, Ava, with eyes like mine and lungs like a fighter, I was already building Salt plus grit on the side. Nights, feedings, deadlines, I did them all like my life depended on it. Because it did. At age 3, Ava asked me, "Why don't we have a grandma like the kids at school?" I told her the truth. Because some people love you only when you obey. But that's not love. That's control. She nodded slowly. "Then we don't need them, do we?" "No, baby," I said. "We build new things now." And we did. By the time Ava was 8, she could read profit loss statements better than most adults. By the time she was 10, she sat beside me at board meetings because I didn't just want to raise a daughter. I wanted to raise a woman who knew her worth. 12 years after that slap, that shame-filled night, that silence, I gave them the one thing they never gave me. A chance to watch. Not to participate. Not to be welcomed. Just to watch. And watching me walk away, again, was the cruelest, kindest justice life could offer. 2 weeks after that jet landed, after that unforgettable silence, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a phone call. An actual handwritten letter with my mother's tight, slanted cursive on the envelope. Ava brought it to me while I was reviewing campaign pitches in our sunlit kitchen. "Mom," she said curiously, "who writes letters anymore?" I took it gently, already knowing who it was from. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it for a while, because for the first time in my life, she wanted something from me. Not obedience. Not silence. Something else. A second chance. That weekend, Ava and I were invited to a private fundraiser in Manhattan. Old money, clean suits, glass walls, and staged smiles. Ava was bored out of her mind until she spotted the piano in the corner. She walked over, touched the keys, and asked the event host if she could play. People chuckled. But then Ava sat down, and the room went still. She played a haunting arrangement of Clair de Lune, the kind of sound that makes even powerful people go quiet. The kind of performance that makes you feel like you're hearing pain and power at the same time. And then, from across the room, I saw her, my mother. I hadn't invited her. She wasn't supposed to be there. But somehow she was. Clutching her purse like a lifeline, standing against a marble wall, watching the girl she had never met play music with a soul she never nurtured. When Ava finished, the applause was thunderous. My mother was crying. After the event, she approached us outside the valet. "She's breathtaking," she said softly, reaching out. Ava looked at me. I didn't say anything, just watched. My mother knelt, trying to smile. Do you know who I am, sweetheart? Ava tilted her head. You're the one who kicked my mom out, right? My mother's face went pale. The air between us grew heavy. I made mistakes, she whispered. I thought I was protecting you. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I interrupted. There's a difference. Her hands trembled. Can I take her to lunch sometime? Ava looked up at me again, waiting for permission. I didn't speak. Instead, I handed my daughter my car keys and told her to wait by the SUV. Then I looked my mother dead in the eyes. Lunch is earned, I said. Not owed. A week later, another letter arrived. This time it was longer. A confession. A breakdown of all the ways she believed silence was strength and control was love. She admitted she was wrong. That her love had always been conditional. That she never understood how powerful daughters become when you abandon them, but they survive anyway. She said she saw Ava and saw the woman I became. And she envied me. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because some forgiveness doesn't need a speech. It just needs a boundary. Ava? She chose on her own. One day, she wrote her grandmother a letter back. A short one. I'm happy, Grandma. But my mom is the reason why. If you ever want to be part of that, you have to start with her. That was the first time I cried in years. Not because I was sad, but because Ava had become everything I wasn't allowed to be. And she got there by watching me walk through fire without turning to ashes. It was a warm afternoon in late spring when the reunion happened, not planned, not formal, just inevitable. Ava's school was hosting a legacy luncheon, where students could invite a family member who'd influenced their path. I assumed Ava would pick me, like she always did. But the morning of the event, she quietly asked if she could invite someone else too. I raised an eyebrow. Who? She hesitated. Grandma. I felt the old wounds tug at my ribs, but I trusted my daughter. If Ava was extending a hand, it was because she had found a reason worth trying. So I said yes. I watched my mother enter the auditorium like a woman who knew she had no right to be there, but was still hoping to earn one. She wore a pale blue blazer, hair pinned up, hands shaking as she clutched a modest bouquet. When Ava stood up to speak, the room grew still. My legacy, she said, voice clear and proud, comes from a woman who built a future out of nothing. She taught me that silence can be louder than words, and that survival is sometimes the most graceful kind of revenge. The crowd clapped, but then Ava added, and today, I invited someone else. Someone who once made the wrong choices but is trying now. My mother gasped softly. Ava turned toward her and said, forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about not letting hurt control your story. Everyone turned to look at my mother. She was already crying. After the event, we sat in the school garden under a willow tree. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was tentative, like two people relearning how to speak. I don't deserve this, my mother said. I'm not offering it because you do, I said. I'm offering it because I don't want Ava to grow up thinking grudges are the only inheritance. She nodded slowly. I kept the letter Ava sent. I read it every night. I figured. There was a long pause before she reached into her bag and pulled out something I never expected. The engagement ring. The one Mark gave me. The one she forced onto my hand all those years ago. I kept it, she whispered, because I thought I was right. I thought if you ever failed, I'd give this back and say I told you so. But I never failed, I said quietly. She nodded, eyes glassy. No, you didn't. You rose. And then she dropped the ring into my palm. Do with it what you want. Sell it. Burn it. Bury it. Just know, I don't hold the past anymore. You do. I gave the ring to Ava a week later. She looked confused. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you want, I said. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't let it decide who you are, or who you love, or who you forgive. She smiled. Deal. Years passed. My parents never fully healed, but they tried. And sometimes trying is enough. Ava grew into a woman stronger than I ever imagined, sharp, kind, unshakable. And one day, as I stood beside her, Watching her daughter run across the lawn, I thought about that slap, that night, that silence. It didn't break me. It birthed me. If this story hits you even a little, just hit that like button. It helps more than you think. Don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt this kind of pain. You're not alone.